Look, first of all, I want to echo what the Minister said in terms of the support across the House for the domestic violence register. And I think that's really important because the model that we've landed on has been able to attract support. But it's important to say from the very outset, there were many people who had very significant concerns about the idea of a domestic violence register. And in some cases, they were very well-meaning people who represent people in domestic violence. In other cases, they were people involved in the legal profession, people involved in regards to civil society. So the unanimity that we've landed on this in the House, and I do appreciate it in terms of the opposition, it took some time to get there, and I think in considering these amendments, it's worth understanding why we've landed on the model that we have. Curdic, you might give me a moment just to welcome the Poole family here to the Chamber in such large numbers. You are incredibly welcome, particularly Jason, who has been the driving force behind this all the way through. When Jason first came to speak to us about this, Jason always spoke about the most serious crimes. And it's important that that was the focus of what we were trying to do from the very beginning. Because, as we know, Jennie was the subject of an offence at the most serious level. But it's important to remember who Jennie was, Cahir. Jennie was a 24-year-old mother, a wonderful mother to Zach and Nevaeh, a healthcare worker in our community. She was a very much loved member of her camogie team in Erin's Oil. And in many ways, she was the very best of our community. Now, we all know what happened on the 17th of April 2021. I spoke about it yesterday. I certainly don't intend to speak about it today because that man has taken enough from the Poole family without me reliving it here today. But remember with the hurt, and there was so much hurt, but the hurt centred on the fact that behind that tragedy, Jennie was not aware that her ex-partner had a previous conviction. And not only was she not aware, and I think we all believe that if she had have been, not only was she not aware, but she didn't even have a mechanism in which to find out that he had a previous conviction. But that tragedy was further compounded because during the court case, Jennie's family didn't realise until during the court case that conviction was there. So, in trying to pursue Jennie's law, as Jason eventually called it, and I remember he came to me with a list of 10 different areas, some of which we have moved on, ministers moved on in terms of access rights for a parent who's involved, or a partner who's involved in a murder and so on. But on this specific issue, the idea of granting access, we always knew it would be problematic in establishing a register, similar, for example, to the sex offenders register. And I want to acknowledge Fiona O'Loughlin, whose original bill did use that type of model, because that is where we thought we could first progress it. But all of the issues around people's privacy, GDPR, all of those other issues started to become the blockages as to why this couldn't be done. And I have to acknowledge, Minister, that under a different minister, the Department of Justice were extremely opposed to this bill. The replies that come from the minister, often written by the department, were extremely opposed to how this bill could be introduced. But I think the mechanism that you have used, and it's a very simple mechanism, is the reason why we've got here. And that's why I want to speak to the amendments, okay? So the mechanism essentially is that justice should be done in public. But because often media are not present now in our courts, that can often go unreported. So the simplicity of that is that justice should be done in public. And the minister, unlike on civil cases, the minister has now found a way for the very first time that in criminal cases, judgments would be reported on the court service website. It's never been done before for other offences. So that then, for the first time, moves us away from all the issues of privacy and all of that, And it moves us into a very simple sphere of justice should be done in public, and therefore, if a decision of the court is public, it is already a matter of public record, and all we're doing is publishing that on the website. But when we do that, we're inevitably balancing the independence of the judiciary. And that is why there is some discretion in the legislation, because, of course, there's a separation of powers. And so in striking that balance, the minister's trying to acknowledge that. There was also concerns in expanding it beyond the current number of offences which the group of amendments seeks to do, including murder, manslaughter, rape, strangulation, coercive control, and so on. And the reason for that was that in some cases those representing victims of domestic violence were fearful that it would put people off seeking a barring order, for example. Okay, because in initial stages there was talk that all of that should be included in it. I suppose by limiting it to the most serious, the fatal end of things, the minister has limited it to those things for a reason, and some of it is the concerns of people who represented people with domestic violence. So I just put that on the record, and I put the process on the record, because that is why we've landed with it. It's not because we decided to limit certain elements of this, or because we're juggling that balance with the judiciary and the powers of this House. The fact that this is, for the first time, a criminal judgment being published on the website, and that it is this model and not the other model of for example, the sex offenders register, which involves a whole different methodology and process. So I say that to the deputies who moved the amendment, because they just might not have been as aware of how we landed where we were. Look, just to conclude, Ken Corder, because I won't speak again on the other amendments, I do want to acknowledge how far we've come, but do want to acknowledge the Poole family. This law will be transformative in helping people across Ireland who are in a relationship to discover whether their partner had a history of a domestic violence conviction. And I think in her life as a mother, as a care worker, as a club member, Jennie gave so much to the community where she lived. She stood for everything that's so positive about our community, and I think it's particularly fitting that even in the tragedy that her and her family have experienced, that she has continued to inspire this House to pass Jennie's law. And I commend the Minister for his work, and I commend it to the House.